Okay, well, am I recorded? Okay.
Sure.
Well, I am very happy that we can have this program this evening. Before I get into this, previews of coming attractions. It's summertime, and we don't do shows in the summertime. We take a break and go have a good time. So the next show will be sometime in early September, and we've invited American Whitewater to come on up and tell us all the neat things they do. And this is truly an impressive organization. Many of you support it. If you don't, you might even want to consider that. So anyway, that's our next show. Well, as for tonight, of course, we've invited Court Ogilvie. We didn't have to go all the way to California or Wales this time. As I said in the advertisement, he's in our own backyard. We got people doing neat stuff around here. Maybe some of you people listening, maybe it's time for you to do a show too. But that's got to wait until Court talks. He has influenced me, not only in our shared love of the North Country, but finding out that there may be a different way to run rivers. And he'll get into that too. So I've talked enough. I want to turn the floor over to Court, and I, like hopefully the rest of you, are going to mute myself.
All right, thanks, Ed. Thrilled to be here. I really appreciate the invite. Appreciate a chance to share a few stories and a few images from the last, I don't know, probably 15 years or so. So I'll try and move quickly. I've got a handful of slides on pack rafts. I want to talk a little bit about trip planning, and then we'll take a look at some trips, and then I've got a video sort of towards the end that is of our trip last year. A little bit about me. I know a lot of you. I hope to get to know the rest of you. Really, I've learned a lot from this group. When I broke into paddling, it was the CCA and CCA membership that really taught me about the sport. So a lot of you probably have seen me swimming in various rivers across the Mid-South. Obligatory whitewater shots up front. This is from the Gauley and from the Upper Yak. And here's a shot of my wife and I tandem on, that's Kuntz Flume on the Lower Gauley. It's my wife Susie up front. So that's sort of my roots. And speaking of roots, what people notice about this picture is a full head of hair on me to the left there, which is not there anymore. What I notice is I'm holding a hockey helmet. So this is like early days. That's cheating arrows. And this is that same picture from this year. It's my brother in both of those shots with me to the left. So here's proof that I've been at this game for a little while. All right, so jumping right into pack rafts. New possibilities. Ed talked about that earlier. I wanted to go to more places. And this is the Alaskan Arctic here. This is looking out over Walker Lake and Gates of the Arctic National Park. Another shot of Walker Lake with the sun kind of late in the day. I mean, it's 24 hours of sun this time of year, but you get some really cool angles. And that's the Marsh Fork and the refuge. And a lot of these places require you to carry your boat in or pack it on a really small plane. And so that's where pack rafts really work their magic. So that's it. Like that's what a pack raft is when it's broken down. That's about a 6.5 pound boat with a breakdown paddle. It's about the size of a backpack tent. And this is my boat that I paddle most frequently. It's about 9 pounds. Again, super light, but also nimble and pretty durable for what it is. Parlor trick here. I don't think there's much utility in being able to do this, but that's my wife just this past Sunday. Her boat weighs about 7 pounds. A little more.
Como medio de transporte, aunque ya hay ciclopistas, sigue siendo
shuttle
peligroso.
options.
Even though there are lots of bike
Somebody needs to mute, I think.
cyclists.
Pero
Lots of
estos
shuttle
espacios dominicales,
But there are more and more people coming out on Sundays.
Uh-oh. I've got some competition.
People, mute yourself.
So carrying these boats is pretty easy, obviously. And so sometimes I just walk the shuttle, and you can see we're still smiling here after walking a shuttle. So can't be too bad. And this is a look at the early outfitting. This is my first alpaca, and a lot of this was kind of do it yourself. So you can see thigh straps that I put in. That's a thermarest in the bottom. It's a kayak back bend that I adapted. And all those plans were on the internet. I didn't figure this out myself. Some other smart person did, and then I just copied them. But Alpaca figured that out pretty soon as well. And this is their new outfitting. There's about 35 companies that make pack rafts. I'm really only familiar with Alpaca and Cocopelli, but there's a ton of them out there. But you can see what this looks like now. Thigh straps, proper seat. There's combing and a cockpit rim for a spray skirt. And the combing comes out, so you can pull it and collapse the boat really small. But when the combing is in, it just attaches and then zips in, and it makes a really nice cockpit rim. So you can stay in the boat, roll. I'm still working on that part, but that's the idea. The big boys and girls are definitely rolling these boats, and you can see the cockpit rim here. Inflating is also kind of a low weight proposition with these just using a bag. So you could just screw in an adapter and then squeeze the bag, and in about 2 minutes you can get these boats pretty much full. It's not really even very difficult, but it's super easy and super light. Lots of gear. That all goes into a pack raft super easily. This was a camping trip in Hopeville Canyon, and we had no problem getting all that gear in our boats, or on our boats in that case. These are early days before they had invented the cargo fly, where you could store gear inside. You can also store bikes on these boats. And Sam Carlson, who's a local paddler, some of you may know, that's him and his daughter in Whitehorse, and they're carrying their shuttle vehicle. So there's an idea for you for the Escalante shuttle. Maybe you just bike back when you're done. Let's look at the cargo fly. So gear goes inside. Pretty slick design, and I guessed 135 liters. It's probably more, but you can get a ton of gear in these boats, and they handle really well loaded. And you can get a view of the cargo fly here, all zipped up. And I was worried that would be a failure point, but so far I've not had a single failure of my cargo fly. You just have to keep sand out of the zipper teeth. Alpaca's lineup is exhausting maybe now. People on this call know a lot about boats and boat design. I'm sure more than me. You can get an idea of what some of these designs are for just based on looking at the profile. And here's my stable. So I've got 5, and this is kind of the evolution from from the small light boats to the heavier boat here on the right. This is the Valkyrie, which is their newest design. It's a whitewater design, paddles the most like a whitewater boat. It is not a hard boat. It's not really supposed to be, but they figured out the edge, and you can definitely roll those boats. It's worth talking about the social factor. I think one of the nicest things about these boats is brand new paddlers can paddle them, and really advanced paddlers aren't bored in them. So there's a pretty big range. My wife Susie's a pretty accomplished paddler, so maybe this isn't the right slide to drop in right behind this, but certainly lots of new boaters can jump in here and do well, and there's plenty for more advanced boaters too. My friend Aaron out in Colorado, this was his first day in a pack raft. His brother Kai, same story, first day in a pack raft. Friend from Switzerland, this is up north in the Arctic. Lou Campagna, who might be on the call, I'm sure is known to many of you, has joined the ranks of pack rafting. My buddy KB, who I think is on the call, this is on the Covington. Sam brings his ukulele, so I don't know. I guess it's like a pack raft thing to have music with you. I have no idea, but he packs bikes, ukuleles, you name it. And I went down to NOC and I took some instruction, and it was super helpful. The same way I learned to paddle a hard boat, I spent some time with Will Norris, who was their head of instruction, and with Lewis Brown, who really helped me a ton, and were able to adapt a lot of hard boating skills to these boats. And then there's this guy, Ed, who you might know. That's at Z Channel. I think that is at Z Channel, pretty sure. Still got that helmet, Ed? I think you do. You've had it ever since I've known you. All right, so how do they do in whitewater? Really well, exceptionally well. This is on the Covington. That's Nantahala Falls. That's Susie. That's my brother at Top of the World on Bloomington. And this is really where I started to think about possibilities. This is the New Gorge, one of my first trips, about maybe 12 years ago. And the boat did exceptionally well and some pretty big waves. That's at Fayette Station. That's the Ocoee. That is Cucumber on the Lower Yacht just this past weekend. Nantahala Falls. I'm looking very studious here. I don't know why, but that's on the Gauley. This is Lower Mash on the Gauley, Lower Gauley. I was talking earlier before the call really started about back-endering. That is the one design feature of these boats. They do have a tendency to back-ender. So you've got to carry good speed if you're running big holes, or your bow's gonna be in the air because it just doesn't weigh anything. But they are super stable. I will say this is Kuntz Flume. Okay, maybe they're not that stable, but by and large, they do pretty well. And I have a short video here. The sound will be a little wonky, but it doesn't really matter. But this really, I think, shows the maneuverability of these boats. It's about a minute long. All right, so you get an idea of what these things can do. The limit is not the boat; it's definitely the paddler. And I'm routinely, the threshold is me in these boats. So that's kind of an intro to Packgrass. And again, I don't make the assumption that, I mean, I know a lot of you have these boats or have seen them around, but wanted to at least give a little bit of an overview there. So I wanted to share a little bit about trip planning, just because that technology has changed so much and changed the game so much, and looking at places in the far north, really all over the world. So yeah, we still do use maps. It's my friend Rado. And most of the trips I've done, I've been in the Brooks Range. So the refuge is up here and Gates of the Arctic is kind of over here. And I mean, this is part of why I go. And there's just some really amazing country up there. That's the Noatak. It just feels like you can look as far as the eye can see up here. This purple line is where the Noatak is. I have quite a few slides from that. This is a Google Earth trip plan that we built that before the trip, just to kind of get a sense of where we might camp and where our side hikes might be. And you can get 3D in Google, which is phenomenal for planning and for getting an idea of day hikes and potential hazards and that sort of thing, including planning a side hike. So here's a Noatak side hike that we plan. In fact, that picture I showed earlier was from the summit of this mountain here. And you can get really techie. This shows slope angle. So if you're trying to figure out just how steep is this hike going to be, the red areas are steeper. You get a really good idea of the terrain. Now, things look easier from outer space sometimes. I mean, you got to ground truth them, but it's really helpful just to have more of a basis. There's also real-time or near real-time satellite. I didn't know this was a thing, but it very definitely is. So this was June 28th of last year, and we were interested in landing in this lake here, and you can see that there's margins, but there's still ice on that lake. And, you know, the pilot knows what where they're going to fly. But from a planning perspective, it's just helpful to see that. This is 5 days later, all the ice is gone. So if you're thinking about landing on that lake, you got a pretty good shot at it by the 2nd of July. And this is today. So I'm kind of keeping track. This is the area that I'm heading to in just a couple of weeks, and I want to kind of know what the snow melt is doing. Tech, I mean, this slide just says bring it with you. And I know we're trying to get away from our phones out there, and I fully support that. But these are really emerging tools that are super helpful. Here's a good example. This is from really a friend of a friend. It's a river in Bhutan, and you can see like a nice kind of ribbon of water here. And then the next day, there's a huge landslide and water starting to pool up here. And there's water pooling up here as well, another little landslide here. So they're, the people planning this trip are watching that, and they can see, the lake grow, and now you get a little bit of white water showing up here. And then by the 5th day, this is like a ripper of a rapid. And imagine floating into that and not knowing about it. So they were able to factor that into their planning. They figured out an interesting route to carry around. They weren't surprised to hit a lake when they thought they were going to be in a river. Just briefly on emergency gear, I do carry a two-way satellite device. Pilots now pretty much require it because they want you to give a weather report. And then that's a airband radio, some way to signal, and then some basic bear precautions, which I think are pretty standard. Getting up there to the Arctic, lots of gear. I talk about pack rafts and how light they are. This is a combined trip with a raft trip, and we brought a lot of stuff. And I don't think this is what the Airbnb host had in mind, but it worked out for us. Loading up to head north. This is the Alaska Highway, or the Dalton Highway, the haul road. 250 miles north of Fairbanks. So we flew into Fairbanks and then drove to Coldfoot, which is really just a truck stop. And you got to be flexible in Alaska. Sometimes the road's closed, or like they're out of gas. I mean, it's just not a very predictable environment in the Arctic. It's really at the edge of infrastructure and beyond it. They were laying a culvert in the road, and we just had to hang out for 3 hours. And that happens sometimes. So you have to just bake that into your schedule. This is crossing the Yukon, and you can see the pipeline here in the background heading north. BLM campground for another gear throwdown. Lots of gear. Again, these are multiple trips that I pulled from here, but gives an idea. Got to weigh everything to get on a little plane. That's a Beaver on wheels. One of several types of planes that you see in Alaska. This is really the backcountry workhorse. That is a Beechcraft Bonanza. This is a 185 on floats, and I don't know if you can see, but there are wheels on these floats as well. So this plane can take off on gravel and land in a lake, which is a pretty handy feature. There we are heading out with Danielle, our pilots. Susie to the left. Pros and cons. The Arctic, you got to work for it. You definitely got to work for it. It's expensive, and there's a lot of logistics, but you get up there and it's not like any place I've ever been. The animals don't really know, in some cases, what you are. And really the only sounds you hear are from the natural world. It's really not like any other place. It's Mike Weverick. He did a slideshow for the CCA in the early 90s that about the Arctic, and a trip that he and his wife, Dr. Sarah Seeger, did. And it just inspired me. And I always want to give Mike a shout out when I talk about trips like this. He was a really good guy. He passed away in 2011. I'm sure many of you knew Mike. And I'm sure many of you knew Ron Nippling too, another guy that really inspired a lot of my adventures. Ron passed away just last year, and he really pushed me to go west, and it really changed my life for the better. So again, I just like to give those two a shout out. And this is part of why I go as well. I mean, this is a plane leaving us on the Marsh Fork. And that is a Beaver on floats. Some of the amazing views up there. That's the marsh fork. This is a carry-in trip here, pack raft trip. So we're all pretty loaded, ready for a hike. Pack rafts just before action. And that's in the refuge. Lots of smiles up there. This is Abby trip in a raft. This is that day hike that I showed on the map from the NOAA TAC. Spectacular scenery. And this was the summit of that mountain. This is the Chandelar in the refuge. And this is my wife, Susie, here, kind of standing on this point. It's nice, these Arctic rivers that you don't really have a lot of relief, but you can get up high and really change your view. This is Mattrack Lake off of the NOAA TAC. There's our tent. A little bit of weather. Evening sun's amazing. It's off the tent wall. And you can see the shadows. I mean, you get these low angle, this low angle light that is unlike anything I've ever seen anywhere else. Like 40-foot long shadows from ourselves. 24 hours of sun. There are a few mosquitoes. My friend Aaron took this. I wouldn't have done that, but he got a good shot out of it at least. And we do bring a bug hut. This is about 2 pounds. It's a penalty to when you're carrying it on your back, but if the bugs are really ferocious, it's pretty handy. This is made by Black Diamond. This is not my photo. This is by Patrick Endress, professional photographer. I didn't have a good photo of Tussock, but this gives you an idea. Things might look easy from outer space, but the walking isn't always easy. And just some of the amazing flowers. I mean, end of June, early July, things are just popping. And again, 24 hours of sun. It's really phenomenal. I wish I knew what these were. I would tell you the names, but I have no idea. I think that's a mushroom. Someone might correct me. That's an Arctic tern, and he was around and close to us because he was curious. I don't think he saw a lot of people, at least not recently. And an Arctic fox. And these are wolf tracks. We did see the wolf that made them. It's a white wolf that's on the North Fork of the Koyukuk. You can hear them howling at night a lot. It's caribou. And there are plenty of brown bears. Even the blonde ones are brown bears up there, or they call them brown bears. But they're not too interested in you, at least so far. I just don't think they see enough people. This is not aggressive behavior. This is a bear trying to smell us. So they will stand up to get a better scent. And this very definitely was taken with a zoom lens. This would be way too close with taken with an iPhone. But again, they're not interested in us really at all. Good fishing in places, not everywhere in the Arctic. It's a pretty hungry land, but there is some good fishing here and there. And it's always nice to supplement with a little bit of fish. And that is a she-fish. My friend Steve is a superb fisherman. He caught that on the Kobuk on a trip just a couple years back. And that was too big for us to eat. There was only 4 of us. So we let that guy go. He's still up there. Lots of textures. This is a little tiny wave on the lake. Sand. The banks are super active, and you can kind of see in here, this is permafrost that's kind of melting out and getting eaten up by the river. A little bit more of a close-up there. A very dynamic landscape. So it creates these weird overhangs where you've got tundra or grass that's kind of folding over and falling into the river. You can scout on the way in. This is obviously taken from the plane, and you can see that there is what they call off ice, which is a German word. on the river in places, and it's like an undercut. So you've got to be really careful about that. It's kind of a good view of what that might look like. There's a pretty good amount of current going under that. So it's important to be able to eddy out. And then on a grander scale, the landscape's changing all the time. So this is on the Marsh Fork, and big cleft cut through the cliffs here. Same here. This is on the Noatak. And I'm really captivated by the light. Better photographers than me come back with amazing pictures up there, because you just see so many different moods, and the weather changes so fast. This day we didn't even get a raindrop, but we had a really angry cloud. Hopefully not an angry crowd. Rainbow, and the camps are just amazing. I mean, truthfully, it's not like big Alaska with big towering hanging glaciers, but it's pretty dramatic in its own way, and it's wildly remote. I mean, we're the only people for 50 miles, maybe more. We eat pretty well. Again, this is a mix of heavy trips and light trips, but most of these are from light trips. So this is a heavy trip where we had metal bear canisters, and you can see, some of our equipment is a little bit on the heavy side. Pancakes, burritos are always a favorite, and this is on a lightweight trip here. That's a 1-pound Dutch oven called a fry bake. I like the Frisbee serving implement. It's kind of one of our common plates, the quesadilla. And you can't ever beat the view. And then the fish are great. You wrap them in foil and drop them in the fire. And we try to be eco. We bring a little fire blanket, and we don't build huge fires, just enough to cook a fish or to get a little bit of warmth. And then this is the water filter. Because there's really no trees on a lot of Arctic rivers, you've got to figure out another way to hang your bag. So we just hung a water filter from paddles, and that's a solar panel down there. And it's not always water. Plastic bottles are handy. Susie likes to have a little Canadian Club on her trips too. Lots of ice in these rivers. They're super cold, but that did not stop Rado from taking a bath. I did not have that in me that day. Waiting for the plane to pick us up. This was a colder day, and waiting for the plane is a common thing there. Because it's weather dependent, you can see over the wing there that there's not a super high ceiling here. And some of the best scenery is on the way out or the way in. I mean, you just can see some amazing sights from these little planes. And that's coming back into Coldfoot, our crew. And now I've got about an 11-minute video from our trip last year, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to share the sound. I'll find out.
Some weather down valley. But you enjoyed the flight.
I did.
A muskox sighting, our first ever. They're huge.
This is kale.
I have no idea what kale
You
is.
have seen kale. These are pepitas. These are Brussels sprouts.
I can't tell which are the kale.
Brussels sprouts, kale.
Well, if I just had someone to explain it all to me, it would make more sense.
You did a stellar job of noticing some rain coming in.
What do you think I would order if I could order Uber Eats right now? Oh my God, I forgot it's the 4th. We have to do a parade tonight.
Yes, we do.
It's for the United States of America. To the ocean.
All right, what's next?
It is a really spectacular canyon. It's actually really good after a long day.
A long day of this. Oh my, look at that. And salsa. And we got jalapenos.
It's brightening up a little bit.
We can go higher up on the island where we have a nicer beach, but we have to just watch the water level. We might have to move the kitchen back tonight before we go to bed. I do love what you've done with the place.
Yeah, and I love how you got sand off of this because you went out without shoes on.
I went out without shoes because
you
put
No,
food in my pack that I
I-
discovered when I got in the
I
tent.
did not.
Bacon and eggs kind of morning,
Nice.
and no rain.
I don't know why fine restaurants don't do it this way, because what's more natural than like sucking out of a tube?
How is it?
It's actually quite good.
We're ready for the river. All right, here we are, day, what is it, day 4?
I don't know, I forgot.
Look at this part that's cutting loose up there. The weather feels like it's breaking. You can see a little blue up there.
Yeah.
So that was like a proper class 2 rapid. What'd you think of that, Suze?
That was cool.
Probably a good start.
It said serves 7, and we're on schedule to finish it. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
It's 5 o'clock here.
Here's a nice game trail. All right, we're at Lake Matarac. We're gonna see if we can't tie into some dinner here.
Wow, look at how clear the lake is.
That's beautiful fish, honey.
Yeah. But I saw some bubbles at the top of the water and I was like, I wonder if there are some fish out there.
The fish pose.
There's a 20-inch trout.
Top two.
Ooh. Wow, this is going to be divine.
That's the word.
It's really good.
All right, so where's the bear spray?
There's one over there.
What's this bird here?
He's right above, check out, right above the trees here, in here.
We got a 20-mile day, and then we got to do that carry. Getting there.
sunshine all over the place.
Oh, look at the bird. It did. See him? Halfway up.
Yeah, holy crap, he's right there.
Definitely an eagle.
It's almost noon, but we were waiting out the weather. I think if we continue to wait out the weather, it might be like Wednesday. It's trying to be sunnier. It's getting brighter. The weather feels like it's breaking.
Does it seem like it's getting brighter to you?
No.
The ceiling is definitely lifting.
I think it's gonna burn off. Weather's clearing.
And I still think it's gonna clear up.
It's bluer over there. The sun's thinking about it.
Yeah, that's pretty swirly in there.
Really just like the magical time of the Arctic. People ask me what I love about this place, and the list is long, but the light is way up there. I mean, the light this time of night.
Latest ever, 2:30, but we had such a beautiful morning we didn't want to leave.
It was a fine camp.
It was.
Are you having fun? All right, this is trip number 3. Big sky place. Oh my God.
It's huge. It's amazing.
Got a lovely camp overlooking the lake. I don't think he's flying in this. I think we're waiting.
Planes were grounded. So they couldn't get through to get us. And it was a bonus day.
So here we get a good look of why we're here another night. That is towards the pass.
What's the first thing you're going to do when you get out of here?
I think I'm going to eat enough chocolate where I basically make myself sick.
But the clouds have come in.
Yeah, it's worse than it was an hour ago. So that Gates of the Arctic chicken is sounding like dinner again.
Looking good, lake trout. Catching the fish was a highlight. The beautiful evening with the gorgeous sun was a great highlight.
We're still in pretty good shape, fuel-wise, food-wise, everything-wise, and weather-wise.
Well, now isn't that a sight for sore eyes?
How was that?
Fabulous.
Okay. So that was a capture of last year's trip, about 11 minutes there. It gives you a better sense. I mean, you saw some of the stills, but a chance to see things and with a little bit of movement. gives you a sense of the adventure, I hope. So I just have a handful of slides on resources, and then if there's interest, I'm happy to answer some questions. Packraft Handbook, super helpful tome, really like the definitive text right now on pack rafting. I'd highly recommend you can get this at Amazon. And a lot of the trip planning I have done, I learned at this course, Start and End at Home. There's a guy named Luke Mell out of Anchorage who, the guy who wrote that book, really exceptionally good resource. Not a lot of guidebooks. Karen Jetmark's book is the only one that really is sort of like in a classic guidebook category, but that's really part of the fun of going up there. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't talk briefly about this book. I've sort of moved away from talking about wilderness and more into talking about wildlands, because the Koyukon people have been, the Athabascan people, they've been through these lands for generations, for thousands of years. And this is a book about cultural anthropology in the area, which I found really helpful for some great perspective. And then lastly, the Ambler Road project. You may have heard some of this. There's a pretty big road proposed between the Hall Road and Ambler Mining District. It's about 210 miles and it crosses 11 drainages, and it would be really impactful. And there's not really a great economic argument for it. I mean, I'm pretty biased, I'm sure, but I really, it just doesn't really make sense from a bunch of different angles. This group, Defend Brooks Range, run by John Gedeke, and a handful of folks up there have done a great job of really getting the issue out front and talking about it. And I just want to close with a couple of images. This is Susie on the Marsh Fork. This was one of our first trips up there, and I come back to this photo all the time because it just gives me such a great memory of that trip. And then I'll just close with this John McPhee quote. So that's my show. I'm happy if there's interest to talk about anything that was in here, to talk about anything that that might have come up in the last little bit. But I just really I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all, and I really had a lot of fun just pulling all these images together and remembering all these trips from years past. So Ed, I'll turn it back to you, or if there are questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, it's easiest if somebody submits a chat, but you can just sort of raise your hand or just speak up. Make sure you're unmuted or we won't hear you. For some reason, I can't read my chats. Wait a second. Oh, okay.
Like two of them.
Yeah, one was to me. That doesn't count.
Don't read that one. People won't be a fan of you if you do that.
That
Well,
was
we got
very
awesome.
impressive.
I got a question, Court.
Sure.
So, Court, I've only done one trip, or well, I guess two up there, but I've read over the years stories about rafters, boaters being attacked by brown bears. And what the conclusion I get to is that, 98% of them will just walk away, but there's a bear that got up on the wrong side of the den that morning, and they will come after you, especially if you've cooked fish and if there's a small number of you. So I wonder what your bear defense strategy is.
Well, a couple of things. One is
morning at day and nighttime.
Day and nighttime. Well, the standard precautions are key. So nighttime, you're definitely wanting to have your food one place, your kitchen another place, and your sleeping area a third place. So you're setting up in a triangle like 100 yards apart, and you're ideally sleeping upwind of everything. So that's definitely key. During the day, things are so wide open because you're above tree line so much. It's really hard to spook a bear. I mean, you you see them coming and they see, and they probably smell you coming. So there aren't a lot of surprise encounters. You've got to really be, you have to be mindful of it. But I mean, it would be hard to surprise a bear up there. I never have. And I also think that moving camp is key. So if you're going to have a really smelly meal, you might want to have it at lunch and then float away from that area. And where people get into trouble is when they stay in the same place for 4 or 5, 6 days. And those folks are often carrying a lightweight fence to cordon off either their sleeping area or their food storage, or maybe both. But we've always moved pretty much every night. Occasionally we'll have a layover day, but for the most part, we've moved. And if you do that, it keeps the food smells down. And I also think there's so little pressure in the Arctic that, like, I've never had a bear encounter of any concern at all in the Arctic. I have in other parts of Alaska, but up there, I've never had a concerning encounter. And we carry spray and sometimes noisemakers, but usually just spray and bear barrels. So thanks for that.
So we,
there's
we
a couple
do,
questions in the chat, it looks like.
yes, we do have some now. And let's see, just a minute. Being as remote as you are on these trips, what are your precautions for emergencies / injuries while you're out there?
Well, that's an important consideration. I think the first thing is I make different decisions out there than I would make in the front country. You really can't count on anybody helping, so you've got to be fully self-contained. We also carry a pretty expansive first aid kit. I'm a wilderness first responder. I've encouraged people to get as much medical training as they can, but mostly it's about using your head and really thinking through your decisions and making sure that you don't create any risk, because SOS buttons or whatever you might have for comms, I mean, you really have to feel like you're going to be self-contained. You want me to keep going, Ed?
Yeah, wonderful presentation. Glad I could join. Zooming
From
in
Anchorage.
From Anchorage. My goodness. How do pack rafts do in flatter water? Heck, I could answer that. How about wind? I could answer that.
What's your answer, Ed? I want to hear your answer.
But
what would you say to that?
Because this is your show.
Well, I would say they're terrible on flat water. Pack rafts are not made for flat water at all. You could sort of suck it up and cross a lake if you have to, but I'm not really a fan of pack rafts in flat water. I think you need some moving current. I mean, really, I think this is a river craft. Is that your answer, Ed?
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty flat bowed boats. I mean, they don't do that great, I don't think, in flat water. In wind, it's okay. I mean, I'm an open boater, so I probably have a bad comparison point. I mean, I'm sure it's not as good as a low volume kayak in the wind, but I've not had a lot of issues with wind. Pack raft, in terms of handling, I think the Valkyrie is the most like a whitewater kayak of all the designs they have. And so it's got an actual edge because the floor inflates. It's also heavy, like relatively, it's like 12 and a half, I think close to 13 pounds, which is a heavy pack raft. But you can carve in a Valkyrie and it really paddles much more like a kayak. The Wolverine is a great versatile all around whitewater boat. I mean, that's my second choice in whitewater is the Wolverine. And then handling it with cargo capacity, the Narwhal is the bigger tubed boat that I have, and it's really more of the big water boat. And it does really well with heavy loads, but honestly, they all do just fine.
Court, this is Bob Maxey.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, nice show, and I agree with you about the lighting. It's just magnificent. Reminds me of the one trip I did to Alaska. So what was the most dangerous situation you ran into? I know you can't plan on everything, but did you run into a bad rapid? I don't think that you've run into any bears. Maybe the mosquitoes were the danger.
I'm not sure that we've really had a close encounter with danger like that in the Arctic. Um, I'd say probably weather. There have been a couple of instances. Actually, I take that back. So the Marsh Fork trip is really one of my favorite trips. And the irony there is we ripped a hole in the raft and we both got stomach flu and we got super duper cold. And it was our favorite trip there. It's just such an amazing place. And there was definitely a day where it was 35 and rainy and we got cold and we had to change our decisions and we had to camp short and we had to eat simpler and just kind of climb in the bags and hunker down. So that was probably the most dangerous situation that I was in up there. And it wasn't really, we didn't get hypothermic, but we had to make good decisions and we had to make a series of them. And if we had kind of put it off or, sort of rolled our eyes and said, we're going to tough it out, it could have had it could have taken a different turn. So that's probably the closest. So I think just making sure you pay attention to your to your body and to how things are going. And then I also think the rules are different when you're really remote. In the front country, I might not say something like, Ed, I might see you do something at the put in, and I think, oh, I don't think I wouldn't tie that there, or I probably wouldn't with you. Probably the other way around. Ed, you'd see me do something at a put in and think, well, that looks dangerous. And maybe you wouldn't say anything. Out there, you would. Out there, you'd say, hey, you probably shouldn't light the stove like that because like you just sort of cast off the social graces because you realize that if somebody has a problem, it affects everybody and there's not a simple solution. The pilot's job is to get you in to have fun. He's not a rescue person. Like there are places they just can't land. There are most places they can't land and it's not their job to come get you. So you really have to be thinking in terms of I'm on my own. I got to make good decisions and a series of them to make sure that I don't have a problem. So does that answer, Bob? Kind of.
And then it reminds me of one other thing too, Court. How easy was it to follow the route that you were on a map?
Well, I mean, it's a river, so like that dumbs it down quite a bit. Following a river is easy, but I will say that the maps are not real world up there because the rivers cut banks and there's oxbows. And I had a situation one time where I was in a group and somebody was going to go on the other side of an island. And that's a really bad strategy to split up. And you don't know if that's like a 2-mile island or a 5-mile island or what it is. And we could be waiting at the wrong chute for that person to come out. And so we made him, that's a good example of where we just called a timeout and said, all right, we got to stay together here and you're going to have to carry your boat back up to get back in the main channel to join us. So the maps are really not accurate from a sense of like where the channel is. But on a river trip, you really are kind of dumbing it down to make sure or to know that like you're going to be en route. Where it's tricky is when you need to get to the pickup spot and you're not sure exactly where that is. And even if you got GPS coordinates, sometimes the coordinates you get might be a tiny bit different than what you're looking at because it's changed in the course of a season since the last time that pilot flew to that location. So you got to make sure that you leave enough time to figure that piece out.
Yeah, thanks for the show, Court. It was really enjoyable.
Thanks for joining, Bob.
You're welcome.
And I wish I had your camera skills up there. I would have a totally different show.
Your pictures are just fine.
Thank you.
They were wonderful.
Thank you.
We have a question here. Have you ever considered or had a need for a drone to scout surroundings or rapids? The high-end whitewater people are doing this now.
I have not. I mean, you're not allowed to fly in the national parks or in the refuge. So there's a lot of impediments there. But there's also, that would just be a lot to keep track of in a lightweight trip. I mean, you saw some of our trips are heavy raft trips. We could probably bring most anything we wanted on a trip like that. But I've not. I do know that people are using those and getting some good information. The one place where it would be helpful would just be to understand where there's off ice, where you have ice over the river that's creating an undercut. And I could see a utility there, but have not done that. Question about the Park Service staff. Quite a bit. Did I interface with the Park Service staff and was it okay or not? I have had terrific experiences with the rangers in Gates. I had a really good experience with the refuge manager at the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I find that they're professional, that they ask good questions and give good information. I've stopped through and shared what I could about where I was because I knew that that might be helpful to somebody else. And there's so few visitors, relatively speaking, that they can have a personal relationship with you about like what you saw and where you went and where you camped. And like that white wolf, I told the ranger about the white wolf and the ranger said, "Oh yeah, I know that wolf." So like they get out in these areas and they know their areas really well. And they're not, I mean, there's a lot of natural filters to these trips where it takes a lot of effort to get back up in there. And so I don't think that they have a lot of cause to not trust people who are showing up to go on these kinds of trips. So I've really had great experiences with the Park Service up there and with Fish and Wildlife and with BLM. Those groups have done a terrific job.
Well,
other questions?
Yeah, I have one. Can you hear me, Court?
I can. I can. Good to see you, Mike.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks. You too. I know you've been to Alaska a lot, and also in the winter, doing dog sledding and recording for the Iditarod and stuff. I have a link to your Whitewater Funhouse video on my homepage, so I know you've got most of that stuff on. I'm sorry, on the BRV homepage, but I know you've got a lot more stuff on Vimeo. Can you get a link to that on somewhere on CCA?
Sure, I'm happy to share that. I have more videos than people have time or interest, I'm positive.
We're putting videos on CCA's YouTube channel.
Well, I have quite a few, so I'm happy to share.
Certainly. Good. I like the dog sledding ones.
Yeah, I have not been to the Arctic in the winter. I can only imagine, but I've looked at the satellite out of curiosity a few times, and it is a pretty white place. These rivers, things don't melt out for a long time.
Yeah,
what's that?
Your Whitewater Funhouse video is a fantastic film, and it just goes to show you that the editor writes the history.
Yeah, that's
Show
true.
everybody else swimming but yourself.
That's very true. What's my next trip? I'm actually leaving next Friday. I'm gonna spend a little bit of time in Fairbanks visiting friends, and then I'm hoping to float the Alatna by pack raft with my wife and my friend KB. That's our current plan. And I say hoping. I've actually tried to float the Alatna 4 times and I've not done it. I've done other interesting things, but one year the lake was frozen, one year it was on fire, one year it was too high, one year there wasn't good flying weather. So when I head up, I always try to have a few trips in mind, like maybe 2 or 3. So if I show up to fly out and they say we can't do this, but we can do this other thing, I've got some other ideas. And I've been going with Coyote Air out in the Arctic, and Dirk and Danielle are just wonderful people who care a lot about their clients and will help you plan where they can. But nothing beats spending a little bit of time trying to figure things out before you get up there.
I have a question, Gort. You're obviously in communication with the rest of the pack raft community. Has anybody had problems with animal damage? Now, it doesn't have to be as dramatic as a bear. It could be mice. I feel very vulnerable in that little craft in that respect.
So yes, but they're so field repairable. There's no glue involved. I mean, there's really not much involved to patching a pack raft. And in the areas where we thought bears might come chew on our boats during day hikes, we always deflated the boats and tried to move them somewhere so that they weren't a likely target. If you leave boats inflated, bears will reportedly come and chew on them. I've never had that experience personally, but that can happen. But the repair is pretty straightforward, and Tyvek tape works really well. So if you're on a big extended trip, like this summer, we'll bring a big roll of Tyvek tape, and it looks like hell, and it'll never come off that boat. But if you're trying to get to a pickup point, I'll take an ugly boat over trying to get, 4 people into 3 boats, that sort of thing. So I think the short answer is I'm sure it happens, but that repairability makes a lot of difference.
Will Gorilla take too?
I don't know. I actually would recommend Tyvek. Tyvek is by far the pack rafter's tool of choice, beyond like the clear stuff that Alpaca sells.
I couldn't find it in the hardware store the other day.
Oh, really? Huh.
Does it
Well,
go by
Tyvek
different
is they use for building wrap. So if you put a vapor barrier on new construction, they use Tyvek wrap to do that, and then Tyvek tape to connect those panels. So any Home Depot should have it, and it's cheap.
Okay, I'll look again.
Next time I see you, Ed, I'll bring you a roll, because I'm sure I've got 3 or 4 around. And I've actually never used it. I've my boat probably has a half dozen patches, but they're all like pinhole leaks. And I've never had to use Tyvek tape for anything, but I'm told it's quite reliable.
I'm as scared of mice as I am of bears, so
I can see that.
yeah. A mouse ate my car recently.
Oh, wow. I've not had that happen.
So someone asked, what's your next trip? But you probably have a whole lineup. What's the ultimate one?
Well, every time I go up there, I come back with, like 4 more trips. The trip that I really want to do up there that I haven't done is the Aniakchak, which is it's actually in the Aleutians, and it requires like good flying weather, and so you have to build a lot of time into your schedule. But you fly out of King Salmon and you land in a big caldera, and you float through like class 3 plus for about 15 or 20 miles. And then I think it's about 40 miles of just fast water to the coast, and you get picked up on the beach. And that just seems like a cool trip. It's been done. It's not like Nat Geo kind of stuff. I mean, I'm just a hack weekender, I'm not trying to do first ascents. And I mean, Ed, you've done far more first ascents than I've ever even read about. But I'm definitely interested in that trip. And I've talked to Joe Bryson about it, a couple other people about it, and we sort of kicked around the idea, and I haven't made it happen, but that's definitely on my list.
Hey, Ed, how do you think the pack raft would do on the Petite Macatna?
Well, it sure would have been welcome on that portage that took us a week.
That sounded horrifying. I have heard that story and read that story.
It's quite a story.
Well, folks, you must have some more questions before we let this guy go.
I'm definitely going to look into those pack rafts. Since my knees went bad and I can't kneel in a canoe anymore, and I've tried kayaks, I don't really like them. I recently bought a stand-up paddleboard, but the pack raft is interesting.
Well, I think they're fun. It's not a hard boat. I don't want to give up hard boating. I mean, I've made a commitment to the pack raft because there's things I want to do that are harder than what I'm paddling now. But I definitely, I see the utility of it, and really the game changer to me, besides just the fact that it's so light and small, is there's still room for growth for me, even though I've been in pack rafts a fair amount. And I just like any craft that it gives me an opportunity to try to do harder and harder stuff. And they're, stable and comfortable for sure.
Yeah, I like the lightweight factor for mine. Matter of fact, I want to demo one because my canoes are too heavy for me now. You know, I don't want to portage. So
I will say every time I have a long carry in the pack raft, I think back to my 80-pound open boat, and I don't miss it in those moments. I mean, it definitely excels off the river, put it that way.
Well, that was really neat. That was well put together. I'm very critical of shows. I guess I'm jaded after all these years, and I really enjoyed that from end to end.
Awesome. Well, I
Maybe-
really appreciate the opportunity. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ed.
No, maybe you can give a clinic and presentations.
I don't think anybody would come. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. I was sincere what I said up front. I mean, so much of what I learned about rivers and paddling and the outdoors, I learned from this group on this call. Paddle with so many of you, and so it's just great to have a chance to share a few stories with this group, and great memory lane for me as well, just to have a chance to see some of that. And I'll go collect some more adventures, and maybe if you'll have me again at some point, I'll bore you with more pictures of the Arctic.
Oh yeah. There's room for you, I assure you.
Yes, thank you very much, Court. I really enjoyed it, especially that information about pack rafts. I think I'm going to buy one of those.
All right, my pleasure.
Well,
Really
I'm going to
enjoyed it.
hit the stop button on the recording, and I will post this to the CCA YouTube channel. Thank you.
yeah, good night, everybody. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me.